Imagine the Caribbean not as a vacation paradise, but as a vast, watery chessboard. By the late 17th century, this region was the beating heart of the world's economy. Yet it was a geography of chaos. To the Spanish, it was the Spanish Main. To the British, French, and Dutch, it was a frontier of untapped gold, sugar, and tobacco. But look at the map through a pirate's eyes. The Caribbean is an archipelago of over 700 islands, cays, and reefs. This isn't just scenery, it is tactical genius. Between the massive islands of Hispaniola and Cuba lies the Windward Passage. To the west of Cuba lies the Yucatan Channel. These were the choke points of the 1700s. Every ship carrying silver from the mines of Peru or gold from Mexico had to pass through these narrow corridors to catch the Gulf Stream back to Europe. The pirates didn't roam the open ocean aimlessly. They sat like spiders in a web. They chose bases like Nassau in the Bahamas because of its shallow, limestone shelf waters. A heavy, 40-gun British man-o'-war would bottom out and wreck its hull trying to enter Nassau's harbor. But a pirate sloop? With its shallow draft, it could zip over the reefs and disappear into the mangroves of an unnamed inlet. For 30 years, the geometry of the islands protected the lawless. Who were these men? To the kings in London or Madrid, they were hostes homini generis, the enemies of all mankind. But the reality was more complex. The majority were former merchant sailors. Life in the 1700s merchant marine was a death sentence of maggot-infested biscuits, brutal floggings, and measly paydays. A sailor might work 3 years and return home with less than a month's wages after expenses were deducted by greedy captains. Then, there were the privateers. During the War of the Spanish Succession, men were paid by governments to be legal pirates. But when the Treaty of Utrecht was signed in 1713, thousands of these highly trained killers were suddenly unemployed. They were sitting on the docks of Port Royal in Tortuga with no income and a very specific set of skills. The pirate ship became a strange, dark mirror of democracy. On a Royal Navy ship, the captain was a god. On a pirate ship, the captain was elected. They had articles, a written contract. They had disability insurance. If you lost an arm in a boarding action, you were paid a set amount from the common chest. For an escaped slave from sugar plantation in Haiti or a convict from a London slum, the Jolly Roger didn't represent death. It represented the only place on Earth where they were treated as a man. The pirate's favorite tool wasn't a massive ship, it was the sloop. Single-masted, fast, and able to sail closer to the wind than any merchant vessel. The strategy was psychological warfare. When a pirate spotted a likely-looking target near the Florida Straits, they wouldn't always start with a broadside of cannon fire. Cannons were messy. They broke the very cargo, the silk, the indigo, the rum, that the pirates wanted to sell. Instead, they used the Jolly Roger. When that black flag went up, it was a signal. Asterisk surrender, and we only take your cargo. Resist, and we take your lives. Asterisk if the merchant ship tried to run, the pirates would hoist a red flag, the no-quarter flag. This meant blood. The attack usually came from astern. Most merchant ships had their cannons mounted on the sides, the broadside. By approaching from the rear, the pirates stayed in a blind spot. Once they hooked the ship with grappling irons, the sea wolves would swarm the deck. Often, the merchant crew, who hated their own captains anyway, wouldn't even fight. They would drop their weapons and ask to join the pirate crew to understand why the empires eventually turned so violent against the pirates. We have to look at the Atlantic Triangle. Europe sent manufactured goods and rum to Africa. Africa sent enslaved people to the Americas, the Middle Passage. The Americas sent sugar, tobacco, and silver back to Europe. By the 1720s, pirates were no longer just a nuisance. They were a systemic threat to the global supply chain. They were attacking slave ships off the West African coast, sometimes freeing the captives to join their crews, which terrified the plantation owners in Jamaica and Virginia. A pirate score wasn't just gold coins. They were hijacking the ingredients of the Industrial Revolution. A single hold full of cochineal dye, a rare red dye from Mexico, or high-grade tobacco could be worth a lifetime of honest wages. The pirates sold this booty to corrupt merchants in ports like Charleston or New York, who would then launder the goods into the legitimate market. Piracy was the dark economy of the 18th century. By the 1718, the party was over. The British Crown had had enough. They sent Woodes Rogers, a former privateer himself, to Nassau with a simple offer: the king's pardon or the king's rope. The map began to change. The British Navy started building specialized pirate hunters, fast frigates designed to match the speed of a sloop but with the firepower of a fort. They also changed the law. Previously, a pirate caught in the Caribbean had to be sent all the way back to London for trial. This was expensive and slow. The new Piracy Act allowed for vice admiralty courts to be held right on the docks of the colonies. Now, a pirate could be captured on a Monday, tried on a Tuesday, and hanging in chains by Wednesday. The sight of rotting pirate corpses hanging at the entrance of harbors like Port Royal served as a gruesome map marker for any sailor considering the Black Flag. Between 1716 and 1726, the pirate population plummeted. The Navy didn't just fight them at sea, they burned their havens. They occupied Nassau. They hunted Blackbeard in the shallows of Ocracoke Inlet and killed Bartholomew Roberts off the coast of Africa. The safe spaces on the map were disappearing. By the 1730, the Golden Age was a ghost. The few remaining pirate gangs fled the Caribbean entirely. Some navigated the treacherous waters around Cape Horn to the Pacific. Others headed for the Indian Ocean, seeking the Grand Mogul's treasure ships near Madagascar. But they were a dying breed. The Caribbean was now a tamed sea. The intricate bays were mapped, the inlets were patrolled, and the lawless freedom of the frontier had been replaced by the cold, hard efficiency of global commerce. The pirates had rattled the wrong cage. They weren't just rebels. They were a glitch in the machine of early capitalism. When they began to hurt the bottom line of the sugar and tobacco lords, the empires of Europe stopped fighting each other long enough to wipe the pirates off the map. Today, we remember them through legends and films, but the real pirates were men of their geography. Men who used the jagged edges of a new world to try and carve out a life of their own, however short and violent it may have been. They lived for a merry life and a short one. And in the end, the horizon simply ran out.